I was just getting set up for a new month and new classes, and I need to reset my palette. It's kind of a mess. So I like to do this when I'm starting a new piece, or in this case, starting a new month. It's nice to kind of reset. I go through my whole studio and make sure I've got everything put away and organized. I just feel like I can really relax and start to create if everything is kind of reset. So this is my 9x12 palette. This is how I store mine. If you haven't seen the video of how I set up my palette, I'll try to remember to link that in this video so that you can watch that video too. But I've been using this palette since about August, and I've added some different colors when I've run out, but it's just getting to be a mess. So I'm going to start a new palette. So this is just one of those plastic kind of lunch trays. And I just use that to keep the 3-gallon Ziploc off of the top of my paints. And so what I'll do, I'll try to reach around my studio here. I just like to wipe down the edges a little bit. You can see that it gets a little bit of paint on it. So I just give it a quick wipe, and then I'll set this to the side. I also have two of my favorite, how big did I say this is? It's big. It's probably 12 by 16. Not sure what measurement I gave you just a moment ago, but this is my mess of a palette and what I have left over from all the other paintings that I've done since August. Many of these paints are still perfectly good to use. So I'll be transferring those over to my new palette and then setting out some new paints. The titanium white, I need to reset that. So let's pull in my clean palette and then we can get started. I do like to organize my palette so that I can find the colors. It becomes kind of a muscle memory, just reaching in to get the different colors. This Buff Titan, I'm sorry, Titan Buff, I always call it Buff Titan. It looks still pretty good. I'm just going to go ahead and lift that up and bring it onto my new palette, or onto my clean palette. Let me raise the camera up a little bit so that you can see. These palettes are kind of big, so it is hard to get everything in, but I want you to be able to see what I'm doing here. I can go ahead. It looks like the black. Yeah, it looks like the black is okay. It's a little sticky. I think that what I'm going to do is just put out new. It's just I just would rather start over and not deal with the sticky. I'm such a saver, so it's hard for me to not keep every little thing. So I did just go ahead and move over that gray. That was a gray that I had mixed for another piece that I've done, but it was still perfectly good. This big pile, and again, you really can't see it. Let me see if I can aim it up there. This big pile of quinacridone magenta is still fine. So I'm just going to scoop it up and bring it over to the palette. Like I had started to say before, I like to have everything in my palette live in kind of the same place each time that I set up my palette. It just makes it easier for me to reach in and get the paint because I just remember where I always have it. This is Phthalo Blue, and I'm going to move it over here. You don't have to be overly picky about the placement, but if you just get it at about the same spot, This is an old pile of the name always Payne's Gray. That's the one I'm looking for. It's still pretty good. This is one of our optional colors. For the classes that I teach, I try to keep the palette very limited. I think that if you use a limited palette, you just get so much of a greater understanding of your colors. This is burnt sienna, so I'm going to bring it over. And it's nice to, when you scoop the paint up like this, nice just to put that pretty pile in. It's all the edges, you can see that this edge of the red, this thin paint will dry out quicker. So when I'm building my colors on my palette, I like to scoop up that nice color and bring it over in one nice pile. It'll stay wetter longer. This is an orange that I've mixed. I'm getting ready to do a winter chickadee, so I might want a little bit of orange for him. So I'll go ahead and bring that over. So now back to the messy palette. Now I'm just going to scoop up the rest of this paint and clean this glass palette. So what we can do is just use our palette knife just to scrape off the bigger chunks that we have. And I'll just put it in a paper towel to throw it away. I have to be very careful with my paper towels. One of my dogs, Higgins, loves to eat paper towels. So if he got a hold of these paper towels with his long hair, he would be quite a mess. This dried paint here, I don't know if you can kind of see that. Actually, both of these are metallic paints that I didn't add any mediums to, so they're really dried on my palette. And this red got pretty dry there. But like I said, I've had this palette going for months. So then once you get most everything scraped off, now we can grab our fine mist sprayer and just give a little spray over it. Just make it a little bit easier to scrape off the rest of our paint. And then I just like using a flat blade and just scoop everything off. It really is so nice to be able to set up your palette, just come down and get started. I'm actually planning a painting day tomorrow. So getting my palette all set up today will just make that process easier. Tomorrow when I'm ready to come down and paint, I'll have a nice, fresh, new palette ready to go. So now once you get it mostly cleaned off, you can take it to your sink, of course, and finish scrubbing it down. You could spray it again with a spray mist bottle. So once I get it all cleaned, I'll just store this one until the next time when I'm ready to clean up my messy palette that I'm setting up today. So let's bring in the new palette. Try to wash my hands a little bit. It's a little bit of a messy process. And now let's get set up for the other colors that our palette is missing. Like I said, we use a very limited palette of colors. I'm going to set out yellow ochre, cad yellow, Ponza yellow opaque. Those are going to be the three yellows that I'm going to put here. And then I have a medium red still. we suggest Naphthol red light or cadmium red. Any of the medium reds will work. When I started out with getting bigger professional grade acrylics, I started out trying the Utrecht, and I like them, but I just don't think that they have, they seem to get gummed up a little bit quicker on my palette. So we already have the quinacridone magenta out. We don't need to put that out. I will put out a little bit of black. Again, I have the deep black. Mars black is nice. So some titanium white. I'm also going to go ahead. Oops, this isn't the one. I'm going to put out some burnt umber. Burnt umber is not one of the colors that we have on our limited palette, but it is one of the optional colors that I talk about. It's easy to mix a burnt umber. If you mix up an orange and then just mix in some black, then you'll have a color that's very close to burnt umber. But I'm going to go ahead and add it to my palette. It's just a nice convenience color to have. So as I start to get ready to put my paints out, and hopefully these will all open for me. I was going to say too, I have all of my paints names written on the lids. Where I store my paints on a shelf beside my easel, I can see the tops of the lids more than the sides, so it just helps me to be able to see them. So I'm going to get out the color and my open medium. I love this Derivan Matisse open medium. Any extender gel would work. You'll find your favorites. But I'm just going to start to put out some color. I'm going to start down here at the bottom for mixing in the open medium. So I'm going to wipe off my palette knife and then add in some open medium. You can see how thick, it's really thick gel. I'm just going to grab a chunk of it, kind of like that. It's probably, I don't know, it's maybe half. So 2 parts paint, 1 part open medium. And just mix it up so it's incorporated. And then I move it to its spot on my palette. Like I said before, having it nice and piled up like that just helps to keep it a little bit wetter. I'm going to wipe off this area where we mixed that, and then just continue that process until I have all of the colors out that I want to have on my palette. And like I said, I set it up like this the same way in the same configuration each time, regardless of what I'm painting, because the palette will last a very long time, months and months, and I'll be painting a lot of different things in that time. So just having all the colors out is just handy to be ready to go. This one had quite a bit of paint on the lid. Let me scoop some of that up. And so you can see that just put out just a little bit. There are some colors like the titanium white, you'll use a little bit more of that. Some of the yellows you'll use a little bit more of, generally speaking, in your pieces. So again, I'm just going to mix in the open medium and then move it to its home up here. And you go through a lot of paper towels. It's a little bit of a mess, which is, again, why it's kind of nice to do it, just kind of have it pre-done so that tomorrow when I'm set to paint, I'll be ready to go. I just use the mister bottle to spray that so I can get the next color. Let's go ahead and do the yellow ochre. I love yellow ochre. My art teacher from years ago, it was one of her favorite colors. And I think every time I use it, I think about her. So again, I'm going to slice into the open medium and mix that in. So this open medium is just, I use it only to keep my paints on my palette workable. I like for my paints, when I'm doing a painting, I like for things to dry. I like to do the different layers, but it can get a little bit frustrating to have your paints on your palette or the mixes that you're making dry very quickly. So doing this little bit of open medium really makes that process work so much nicer. I can sit down here and paint for hours and not have to worry about the paints on my palette drying or the mixes, the new mixes that I'm mixing up. I'd love to know what you guys do. Do you guys reset your studio before new projects? I was talking to one of my friends the other day. I was talking with Christy, and she was saying that she was getting ready to go paint, but that she wanted to clean the house a little bit and have everything kind of set up and nice in her house before she sat down to paint. And I totally understood that. I totally get that. It's nice to come down when everything else is kind of taken care of and just paint. So we don't need the quinacridone magenta. I will put out some of the red. And I probably will not hold you guys here watching the rest of the process. Just thought it might be fun to hang out a little bit, mix up some of these paints, and get a new fresh palette set out. I will say that the longer that you keep a palette going, the more you'll start to see it, it kind of have an effect on your paint. So each time that I stop painting for the day, I spritz the top with the water. And then I also spritz the inside of the lid with water. So each of those times that you add mediums or add water, it over time can affect the paint, which is why you saw me with the Mars Black that I had out on the old palette, why you saw me just not try to bring that over. Like I said, I'm a saver, so I have a hard time just throwing things away. But it really is such a small amount of paint. If you divided out what a whole tub of paint costs, and then think about this small amount, it's just pennies of paint. So there's no sense in struggling. If you have a color that you feel like you've just kept too long and it's just not as good anymore, just go ahead and scoop it up, mix it like I've just done here, add in whatever your extender is, and then put it on your palette where it's gonna live. So I will go ahead and keep going. I'm going to add the titanium white. And when I put titanium white out on my palette, I generally put out quite a bit more. And I usually put it kind of down to the bottom right. I keep this space mostly open for brush mixing that I'll do. So throughout the life of this palette, this area will get scraped off and cleaned off more. So I'll put out some ultramarine blue, the titanium white, and some black, and then this palette will be set to go. With the tray that sits over it, you want to try to not have each of these piles be too tall, because once we put the tray over, it can touch on the inside. But when I'm ready to close it all up, I will do a very light fine mist water over the palette itself. I'll do a fine mist inside of this tray, and then I will slide the whole thing into the 3-gallon Ziploc bag, and it'll keep forever. It will keep for so long. And then as I run out of different paints, I just mix up a little bit more and put it back out on my palette. So I hope that was fun. I hope it was fun to hang out with me while I worked on that. Let me know how you set up your palette, or if you have any questions about anything that I've done here. Like I said, I did do another video where I talked more in depth about the limited palette of colors that we use in the Shelly Parker art classes. It's fun to get some of the other colors, and I have some other colors, but it sure is nice just to know this core group of colors. When I sit down, I know how these colors are going to work together, and it just makes the process so much more enjoyable.